going to start sharing my screen so that we can kick off the pre-proposal telecon and just, I guess, housekeeping kind of things for everyone to know. The meeting is being recorded. The goal of this is to ensure that all of the questions that are collected today end up in our updated frequently asked questions document that gets hosted on NSpires. So that you can go back to the questions later on for anything that was discussed today or previously. And please do keep your mics muted for the extent of the meeting until we get to the Q&A section. Let's see, I'm going to start sharing my screen. Hopefully everybody can see it. Let's see. And so just to start us off, I want to introduce everyone to the team that's helping lead this solicitation. My name is Shana McLean. I work for NASA's Earth Sciences and Applied Sciences Division. I'm joined by Lawrence Friedel, the Director of the Applied Sciences Program, as well as colleagues Vanessa Escobar from NOAA NESDIS, Monica Grasso from the NOAA Chief Economist Office, and Joe Conran and Chris Lauer, who also work with Monica in the Office of the Chief Economist. And then we also have with us Krista Straub, who works for USGS. So we effectively comprise the team, and we will be working with any of you working along with the solicitation with us as we move forward through the proposal process. So welcome to the telecon today. Essentially, I'm going to go through the rules of engagement that I just mentioned. If you have any questions along the way, we're going to ask that you just put them in the chat box. But to remind you again, as new people join on, this WebEx is recorded. And so just keep that in mind. Your answers are also going to be recorded. This is to support us updating the frequently asked questions documentation so everyone is aware of the same questions and responses collectively as they move towards the proposal process. All the incoming lines will hopefully be muted during the presentation. If you have a question, just place it in the chat box. We'll collect them along the way. We'll have a Q&A section at the end. But it's good as I run through different slides that if you do have questions that, put them in, we'll come back to them in the Q&A session. And then again, just, once we get to Q&A, we'll open the mics, people can talk openly, but for the purposes of getting through the slides and really elaborating on what we hope to see out of the proposals, just hold like any oral questions or verbal questions till the end. If on the off chance you experience any technical issues or are unable to either speak or add questions to the chat box, do email me at shana.n.mclean@nasa.gov. When we get to the Q&A portion, I'll look at my email and just make sure that everyone's in, they can participate. And if not, we'll get that fixed. We do have Ryan Taylor with us as our backup for technology related issues. As a broad outline of what we're going to go through today, we're going to start off just by introducing you to the sponsoring agencies, which are NASA and NOAA, and learning a little bit about our interests in socioeconomic assessments. We'll also talk about the specific sections of the solicitation. And so this includes the context and objectives, the overall vision of the socioeconomic solicitation, the sub-elements that we expect to see in the proposal, as well as the expertise that's needed in the proposing teams. We have an environmental justice component, which we'll also discuss, along with the funding and award information, the format and contents of the proposal, how we will have our panels review each of the proposals, and the reporting requirements that are essentially a component of what you will be expected to do as part of your proposal. We'll end it with reminders and suggestions slide, just some things to note that we've seen moving forward that we want to keep your attention on. And then also remind you of the overarching timeline. And then we'll end by going into the Q&A portion of the discussion today. And so with that, I'll just start by saying that NASA and NOAA are the sponsoring agencies for this solicitation, but USGS is a key collaborator on this activity. They are the hosts of the Interagency and International Societal Benefits Repository, and you'll learn a little bit about that in today's elements as well. But first, to kick us off, I'm going to turn over to Lawrence Friedel, who will talk about NASA and the Applied Sciences program. Lawrence, over to you.
Great, thank you, Shana, very much, appreciate it. So 3 slides related to NASA and the Applied Sciences program as a sponsor, and then we'll turn it over to NOAA for some perspectives. So within NASA, the Earth Science Division has the mission to help us better understand the Earth. And so we've got a huge suite of satellites that are looking back at the Earth to sort of understand the Earth as a system, the forcings, responses, and all that. And so as we make this information available, we're also trying to sort of see how can people make use of it to support societal benefit activities. And so next slide. And so within that, we talk about the sort of applications, which is the direct use of the information, the modeling activities, other sort of information derived to support decision-making by organizations, whether they be public or private. Just as a quick aside, Shana, at the moment, I can't see the slides shown. I don't know if that's a way to get that back up. Thank you. And so one of the elements within the Earth Science Division is the Applied Sciences program, and I'm not going to read everything on this slide, but basically to sort of say, we're looking to sort of see how do we enable organizations to use this information to support their decision-making activities. There's a range of organizations on the right-hand side that you can see their logos on, public and private and all. And so we're really trying to sort of see how do we lower the barriers for organizations to try it out, or for those organizations that are already familiar with Earth science information, how do we further their efforts to use more of it? And so we recognize that that we do a lot in terms of the research side within NASA. When it comes to the use of it, we've been putting out there to say that this information is valuable for decision making. What we want to do with this solicitation is further the efforts to help substantiate, analyze the social and economic benefits that are accruing from the use of this information. So we feel it's critical to the strategic interests of the earth science community and to the nation, as well as it's part of the value proposition that we have for Earth observations and Earth science information to begin with, and all of the research and the technology development that led to it. So that's part of our motivation for wanting to support the broader knowledge about how to quantify and substantiate the benefits that are coming from all this Earth science information and research. You can see on the right-hand side, there is on the lower right, there's a link to our website, and we did about 6 months ago release a new strategic plan. If you're interested, and if that provides any information for when you're preparing a proposal. Next slide. In terms of the Applied Sciences program, we tend to think about applications in 3 different types. You can see on the left-hand side, there's existing decision support tools that we help enhance. There's new ones that we might develop with a partner, or in some cases, it may just be information products, maps, or other tools that we help. And so those are some of the dimensions in which an application's developed and created, and the information supports decision-making or the actions that follow from a decision. You can see on the right-hand side, these are the thematic elements that we have within the Applied Sciences program, and we have 4 new ones that are with the President's budget. So these are some areas where we have done some work and supported projects that may or may not provide some input for the eventual awardees. You're not in the solicitation. I know we talk about a range of different themes and decision types. By no means are you limited to just the ones here. but we do want to provide that because those are some areas where we've been supporting application development. With that, we'll wrap up the NASA portion of it, and I want to hand it over to my colleague Monica Grasso from NOAA.
Thank you so much, Lawrence. So just for the folks that are not very familiar with NOAA, NOAA is a science-based agency under the U.S. Department of Commerce. And we at NOAA, we are responsible for providing data and forecasts for a wide range of biophysical processes and phenomena, actually from the surface of the sun to the bottom of the ocean. So we have a very complex mission. And Earth observations plays a key role in carrying out this mission. So understanding and for us understanding and articulating the value of these observations is really necessary for us to ensure we make appropriate investments in the future observation infrastructure. And ultimately, this evaluation process will help us align our agency operation and investments with the public, support our budget justification and for future investments, and also help us understand and articulate and convey the value of NOAA services. Can I have the next slide, please? So just to introduce our office, we are a very small office. The NOAA Performance, Risk and Social Science Office has been created like 6 years ago. And we are what we call a staff office. We are under the Office of the Chief Financial Officer. And we support NOAA offices by providing the executive decision support in topics related to social behavior and economic science, so NOAA can better accomplish its missions and priorities. We support NOAA by developing guidance and review on economic analysis. We also work with the offices to shape studies and evidence for budget proposals and justification. We coordinate topics related to economics and social science for the agency, both internally and externally. And we also develop our own studies in economic valuation and social benefits. And we're often tasked with studying the value of new and existing observing systems. So we do face challenges on the studies to finding adequate data and reliable methods for many of the evaluations we have. So we're very excited with this new collaboration with NASA. And next slide, please. And then our office, the NOAA National Environmental Satellite Data and Information Service Office, is the one that is providing the NOAA portion of the funds for the solicitation. And this office is responsible for providing the satellite imagery data used in a wide range of applications of NOAA across all the programs we have, as well as to other government agencies and the general public. The NASA's satellites, they provide 95% of the data used in numerical weather forecast models. And there are multiple sensors and constellations configuration that NASA must evaluate. So this office has an important stake in providing the methods used to evaluate the satellite programs. And now I'm going to pass to Joe to talk about our repository. Next slide, yes.
Thank you, Monica. And so I guess USGS, NOAA, and NASA are developing an interagency societal benefits repository as required by the White House 2019 U.S. National Plan for Civil Earth Observations. The national plan requires that we synthesize state-of-the-art knowledge on the economic value of Earth observations, and this directive is encouraged by international agencies and other partners you see to the right of the slide. This repository seeks to meet the requirement these requirements and will collect metadata on authorship and funding, technical observing system and modeling attributes, societal benefit taxonomies, and valuation approaches. It will be hosted on USGS's Human Dimensions website, and as a starting point, we have gathered over 900 studies. We expect research funded by this grant to contribute to the collection of these studies. And with that, I'll pass back to Shayna and Lawrence.
Excellent. Thank you, Joe, Monica, and Lawrence. And so we're now about to dive very deeply into the components of the solicitation. And so there's a lot here. I'm going to try to hit really the high notes, I think, of what we were trying to see reflected in the proposals that all of you intend to submit. But I would just like to start off by saying that we really appreciate all of your interest in this activity. I think, you know, as the agencies that are reflected here, NASA, NOAA, USGS, we're excited, you know, to see more interest in the socioeconomic assessment, you know, endeavor, particularly as it relates to Earth science information and how we can get better connections between Earth science information and decision making. And so that's the theme here. We're glad to have all of you here listening in on this and interested in submitting a proposal to the solicitation. And so hopefully we can cover a lot of what our vision was when we were putting the solicitation together. And so when we talk about setting the context, we've mentioned this a little bit when you heard Lawrence, Monica, and Joe speak, but we understand that determining societal and economic value, especially quantitatively, can be challenging. But these determinations, the determinations of the value of Earth science information for societal and economic benefits directly helps us manage a lot of our future endeavors. Our future investments in satellite information is one way that you're helping contribute. Another is that these types of assessments help us expand the use of our science in decision making across different sectors. And so it's somewhat cyclical and iterative as I see it. You know, I mean, the more we can show the value, the more we have an opportunity to direct future satellites and other science related infrastructure, and also just expand the way that the role that science has in supporting decision making. And so NASA and NOAA consider it vitally important to increase the nation's skills and capacity to substantiate societal and economic benefits of Earth science information in these settings. And so part of what you're seeing in the solicitation is our interest not only in creating new knowledge and building the capacity to understand what socioeconomic assessments are, what they are in relation to Earth science information, but also how they contribute to these elements of future investments and science for decision making moving forward. And so because it is important to be able to communicate those benefits to audiences beyond the Earth science community, we expect components of networking and engagement to be a formal and highlighted element of what is in the proposals that you submit. And so the objectives that we have, which are reflected in section 3, essentially are the vision that we have, or the goals that we have for how we hope the proposals that you submit will enable or further extend what is already in existence. And so there's a lot of different assessments that have been done, both by the agencies that are involved today in this solicitation and elsewhere. But we really, and there's also been a lot of work around this idea of the value of information. But we're looking to expand the techniques and methodologies that are used in decision support and operational context. So going beyond value of information, what are the different types of methodologies that can be used beyond that? what are the different approaches and different scenarios or themes that could be looked at as a result of these different assessment types. In doing so, a lot of this requires publication. And so you're also expanding the knowledge and literature base of socioeconomic assessments, and also the literature base related to how earth science information supports decision making. So we're looking for the analyses and characterization of complexities to also be extended. And what this means is that often in decision-making context, you're not looking at a single satellite, but rather a suite of information that's integrated into something that supports decisions. And so we're looking in this regard in particular, not for the evaluation of a single satellite or a single capability, but rather what, those complexities, the integrated data sets that support the decision making in different ways. Part of this is also intended to increase the capacity of people that are working in the earth science community, but also that are making decisions and could use the science. And so we're looking to expand the familiarity, the skill, and the capacity of the Earth observation community in relation to socioeconomic assessments, the methods and techniques used. But we're also expecting cross-disciplinary and networking types of collaborations so that this becomes a robust community of earth scientists, economists, and other social scientists and decision makers to really work together and expand these things collectively. And so, again, I'll just end with the fact that the articulation and communication of the socioeconomic value and benefit of earth science information is a core component. And so there's the socioeconomic side that we're looking for, which is the method, the mechanisms, and the scenarios. But we're also looking for strong proposals that articulate the communication components as well. And so a key theme that all of you should be aware of is that this solicitation is asking for a program of activities. It's broader than one individual project. And so in this regard, what we're looking at specifically from all of you to propose is a portfolio approach which provides a range of options, a range of socioeconomic assessment techniques, a range of scenarios that address the intent and objectives that I just reviewed. And so you'd want to look at it not, I guess a clear way to say this is that you could propose maybe multiple scenarios or multiple methodologies. And there will be a part in the slide deck later on where we kind of go through like what that would look like in practice. But it's really important that you take away from this slide in particular that we're not looking for an individual scenario or an individual approach, but rather a suite of those things together that can be run in parallel. Certainly from the capacity building and socioeconomic assessment component, that would be in parallel, for example. But you can also think of, well, we've done this one scenario and how have we learned from it and how can we then build it into the next scenario? So things could be done in a series of events. And so let's dive a little bit deeper into the sub-elements that are expected to be included in all of your proposals. The first is the socioeconomic assessment itself. And so some of what I'm going to say here is probably just a bit redundant, and it will be, but hopefully it drives home the message of what we're looking for, which is that we're looking for a range of assessment methods and techniques. We have seen a lot on the value of information, but how can we go beyond it? And it's not to say that we won't accept proposals that include the value of information as an approach, but really figuring out new methodologies, particularly in relation to Earth information systems, is what we're looking for here. And this includes the refinement and development of methods and techniques, meaning that maybe there are approaches that have been done where It took, they've been done in certain scenarios, but not in all scenarios, or not in a particular way that you're interested in. So there is room for innovation, meaning that if there are activities on value of information that you've seen, but you'd like to expand on them, that's also an opportunity within this proposal as well. But we are looking for, again, this idea that we're not looking specifically at a satellite or a sensor, but rather this suite or integrated set of data and other types of information that support decision making. And this is done in order to increase the quality, quantity, and breadth of socioeconomic assessments related to earth science information, and the number and types of examples that show the value and impact of earth science information to societal benefits and for economic benefits. And so there is a communication component here, which is that is the publication piece, which is how you're going to, through your assessments, deepen the body of literature through publications, either formal publications, peer-reviewed publications, or in other types of literature as well. And the pop-up is just noting that when we talk about the different complexities that we're looking for, the different scenarios or themes, we're looking across a range of application areas. And so proposals could include, these are examples, they're not meant to be leading in any way, but we're looking for themes that are similar to earth information support for land management, for energy, infectious diseases. These are the types of examples of how you could approach the range of themes that you would submit for, but we're also looking for a range of decision types. And so this could be, these are the decision makers. How would the different types of data we have support resource management activities, planning like urban planning or community development situations, or early warning scenarios and things of that matter. So those are the types of decision supports components you can be thinking of. And again, just to reiterate this, we're looking at proposals to have a program of activities, which means that we're looking for a set of candidate topics to pursue. So you're looking for a range of themes, a range of decision types that would be included in your proposal. And then the last line here, the actual set of themes and topics that you work on will be determined post-award through the discussion with the awardee and the sponsors, meaning that you may submit, 5 different thematic areas you'd like to explore, but after the award process, we'll discuss with you, what the timing, the deadlines, what's possible, and which direction we'd like to see some of the activities start with. Moving on to the community and capacity development component. Again, this is a bit of a reiteration to some of the things I'm saying, but we're trying to build a stronger community and a more robust community that's able to speak about these components in a knowledgeable and comfortable way, and to improve some of the insecurities when it comes to thinking about what socioeconomics assessments are, and also, like what kind of, how it's beneficial to the earth observing communities or earth science communities. And so a lot of what we're talking about is engagement internally within the sponsoring agencies and collaborating agencies, engagement outside of the agencies, and then collaboration among these entities. And so what you see reflected in the solicitation and on this slide is that we're trying to build awareness and capacity with socioeconomic assessments with the earth science community. We're trying to build familiarity with the terms, concepts, and methods, and the analytic techniques that you will be proposing, as well as the connections with economists, other social scientists, on one side, but then again with the earth science community. In order to really make this as robust as possible, though, we're very clear in the solicitation that we want to see engagement across multiple disciplines. And so on one side, you're definitely going to see, more likely than not, economists and other types of social scientists. But we'd like to see people reaching out to some of the decision science side of things too. As well as, so that we can connect some of the earth information science to the decisions that are being made, which can enhance how we understand the value of the science to decision making. And then this engagement will help build awareness about earth system science on one hand, but of course it'll enhance the connections with earth scientists as well. And then finally, and it's certainly not the final comment on this, but a very high level goal of ours with the solicitation is to create a diverse community and inclusive community. And so we expect special efforts and attention from all of you to include racially, culturally, and historically disadvantaged and underserved populations in the proposal topics and the proposal that you submit. And so the way that we approach team expertise and diversity with the solicitation is that, and again, it goes back to what I said for the community and capacity development component, is that we're looking for multidisciplinary, multi-sectoral, and diverse teams of people and organizations. And so in this regard, it's most successful as a consortium approach. And so that's what we're encouraging as part of the solicitation, which feeds into, the range of not only expertise, but the range of thematic areas and decision support capabilities that we talked about earlier. And so just to reiterate, inclusion is a core value of the sponsoring agencies. And so we expect proposal teams to demonstrate and articulate how diversity and inclusion are integrated and addressed across all aspects of your proposal. So while we have the socioeconomic assessments and the capacity development, community and capacity development sub-elements in particular, we also expect proposals to include consideration of environmental justice. And this is part of an administrative initiative, so multiple agencies, especially NASA and NOAA, are engaged in increasing environmental justice components across our agency, but we have an expectation for it to be included specifically in this proposal as well. And the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council has defined environmental justice as the just treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of race, color, national origin, income, or ability, with respect to development, implementation, and evaluation of programs, practices, and activities that affect human health and the environment. And so using that as a definition, we ask that proposal teams address their approach to environmental justice as part of their proposal. And this would, this is something that you can consider as one of the thematic areas for your proposal. Okay, I'm talking a lot, but we're getting closer to the Q&A portion. So right now, I'll just review what's already reflected in the solicitation, but certainly open to questions as they arise regarding what I say here. But the funding and award information is that the period of performance for the proposals will be 5 years. The type of award is a cooperative agreement. Maybe just to expand a little bit on this, because it is mentioned in the solicitation, a cooperative agreement is beneficial in that it allows some of the connectivity and support to come from the sponsoring agencies. So NASA and NOAA understand that we're asking proposers to connect with the earth science community and that we represent a large part of that community. And so we have an opportunity to support some of that engagement through the cooperative agreement. And so you can read further in section 4 on some of the ways that we, the sponsoring agencies, will support the proposals. But it's good to, have this as a baseline understanding that we know that some things may be challenging for you, and we will be helping with some of the networking components. The anticipated number of awards is 1 to 2 awards, and we'll go through the timeline in a second, but we hope to have it start as of July 1st. The total amount of funding is $8.5 million in total, with $6 million from NASA, $2.5 million from NOAA, and this will be dispersed across a number of years. So in FY22 and 23, you'll see $1 million from NASA, with $500,000 from NOAA, and then years 24 through 26, $1.33 million from NASA and $500,000 per year from NOAA. For the format and content of the proposal, the 20-page limit for scientific, technical, and management sections should be adhered to. But you just need to be able to ensure that your proposal contains the specific elements that are reflected here. So you want a characterization of the current state of socioeconomic assessments for Earth science information, and then what you intend to address through your program of activities, your purpose, the objectives, and how you're addressing the sub-elements that I mentioned previously. You'll also include the mechanisms and approaches that you will use or you need in order to conduct what you propose for the proposed program of activities. And you should also consider what risks and challenges that may affect your success in the proposal, as well as what you intend to do to address the challenges and risks. I mean, I would think of COVID as an example, right? I mean, there have been a lot of challenges in I think, in a number of ways across the science community. And so if you expect challenges in that regard, that would be a potential example of something you would consider. The formatting contents, this is like verbatim from the solicitation. And so I'll just say that you want to make sure that that each of these are contained within your proposal. The indicators are essentially how you expect to progress through your proposal. So what are the metrics that you're setting yourself up for to understand your progression and different success methods along the way? The consortium is the, the expertise, the structure, the management of your proposal. So not just your team and its how it's multidisciplinary and inclusive, but also how it will approach those the different themes and decision support components that we discussed. And of course, the diversity and inclusion component, which will have descriptive efforts for advancing diversity and inclusion across the proposed work. We also want to see that you have thought ahead enough to articulate what you hope to see as results for your proposal. So what are not only the anticipated results, but how will you be supporting and making more robust this socioeconomic assessments component. So you're mentioning in your proposal what the current state is. Also talk about how you'll be driving it forward and creating more innovations to socioeconomic assessments. The schedule is simply that you want to be able to set milestones for key elements that we've mentioned across the proposal, and then the letters of reference. You can include up to 3 one-page letters of reference from organizations about the proposal team or about the author's interest in the results. The letters can come from the community or beneficiaries that would be served by the work that you're proposing. And then all statements or letters should be delivered to the principal investigator and to be included in the proposal. The evaluation criteria is reflected in 4.4, section 4.4, but essentially what will happen is when we get to March 22nd and the proposal deadline has been reached, we'll start developing a panel review team that will review each of the proposals based on the three criteria reflected here, which are relevance, intrinsic merit, and cost. Some of what I'm talking about are stipulated by our team specifically, and other factors are reflected in the NASA Guidebook for Proposers, specifically Appendix D, which I'll reflect on the next slide. But I do suggest all of you locate the document on Inspires, make sure you're aware of it beyond just my mentioning of it here today. And so relevance, when we look at relevance, we're asking people to evaluate based on how you have proposed in relation to our objectives that you see in section 3.1, and then how you've addressed the intent, scope, and quality of the plan to engage with decision makers in their organizations. The intrinsic merit it includes not only what I'll review on the next slide from Appendix D of the guidebook, but also the likelihood for potential impact to the state of practice and community capabilities. So again, this is that delta, right? Like you're gonna write about what this current state is, you're gonna propose what you intend to do, and we wanna hear how you expect that to improve the state of practice and how you're going to create this more robust community. We're also looking at quality, creativity, and adequacy of the proposed work in the program of activities, as well as the intent, scope, and quality of plan to engage with decision makers in their organizations. And finally, we look at the quality and adequacy of the consortium expertise. So this goes to the multidisciplinary and multi-sectoral composition, structure, and arrangements. And it should also, just to note, be reflective of how you include diversity across this component as well. And finally, the cost, we're looking at quality and adequacy of your approach to manage the project and achieve the objectives that you've set forth for yourself. And so again, please do pick up the guidebook or locate the guidebook for proposers. It's available on Inspires as part of the solicitation. But to expand on the intrinsic merit piece, the components that are being reflected here are that you want to make sure that for intrinsic merit, that the scientific rationale and expected significance or impact of your work is articulated, that the technical quality of the proposed work, including your project management plan and the timeline and how you intend to implement and carry out what you've proposed. These are the things that we're looking at, including the qualifications, capabilities, and expertise of the members of your team and those you intend to engage with. Also note that make sure you're including any, the facilities, the instruments, the equipment, or other resources that you do or you believe you will need in order to carry out your stated objectives. You want to make sure that you're costing for everything as it relates to what you intend to do. And finally, from the cost perspective, we're looking at reasonableness. So making sure that the costs that you have reflected are allowable and allocable across the project. That's a hard word. But anyways, the point is that we're making sure that what you've proposed seems adequate for the cost that you've assigned. And this particular component will be judged by, it's not part of the peer review process, it's determined by the selection official. And for this slide, these are the reporting requirements that will be expected of the awarded team. But this is reflected in section 4.5. I would simply say there's greater elaboration on that on page 10 of the solicitation. But components that you'll be expected to address are the quarterly summary, where you give us regular updates about the work that you're doing, making sure that you're on progress for the stated objectives and timelines that you've set forth. We'll have any outputs that come from your work will be housed in the societal benefits repository. And then we're looking for also updates and also inclusion in your outreach and in-reach strategy. So there will be opportunities to present to NASA, to NOAA, to USGS on the work that you're doing, but we also expect outreach efforts to include different workshops or symposia or conferences that you'd like to attend to be included as part of your effort. And your engagement materials. And then I would say from the publications and literature review perspective, we've talked a little bit about this already, but we will be looking to see, peer-reviewed publications on the work that you're doing, and other types of media that help extend some of these outreach efforts and the building of an external and internal community, multidisciplinary community. You'll also give a summary of progress at regular NASA program reviews. These happen pretty regularly with NASA, but these are just expected to be semi-annual. And at the end of the 5 years, you'll give a final report and presentation to the community, frankly. I mean, it'll be to NASA and NOAA as the sponsoring agencies, but, how you engage with everybody through your proposal will hopefully culminate in a final activity where you bring everyone together. So now we get to the reminders and suggestions, which means that I am very close to the end. So above all, do please remember that we need you to be very careful when you're looking at sections 3.3 and 3.4 of the solicitation. I've tried to highlight them a lot in this, in today's telecon, and have probably repeated myself a little too much. But it's just to emphasize the things that we care about and want to make sure you get right in your proposal process. I noted earlier, but I'll note it again, communications activities are included in both sub-elements. So do make sure that you're aware of that and that you're proposing to that effectively. The deadline is set. And so when you get to the deadline, there's nothing to do after that. So you want to make sure you're allowing enough time for any reviews internally that you have to go through to submit your proposal, including through your administrator of record. And finally, I would just ask that you please proofread your proposal for typos or errors. You're doing a lot of work putting the proposal together. We understand it is a lot of detail. But when we have the panels review your work, we don't want any of these mistakes to be a reason, why that hinders our ability to review your proposal effectively. So just maybe give it to someone for fresh eyes, but allow for errors and typos to be removed as much as possible. Okay, so now we're at the timeline. We released the solicitation November 22nd. We're at the proposers telecon today. There's only one. And like I said, I will be updating the frequently asked questions document to include whatever we discussed today. I see Bob Chen asking a lot of questions, so we'll get to those pretty quickly. The proposals are due March 22nd, 2022. Note this in your calendar, make sure you're ready. We're excited. And then we hope for our selections to be in July. But everything should be good for this timeline. And so we've made it. We made it to the Q&A section. Hopefully you're all with me through all of this presentation. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so we can look at all of you and start getting to the Q&A portion. So maybe if my sponsoring agencies could come on camera, it would be helpful to have your support in answering some of the questions. I suspect I will most likely serve as a moderator of the questions, if that's okay for everyone.
This is Lawrence. And so Shana, thank you so much for this and fantastic job. I wanted to build on what you said and just add two things. One is on the 7 objectives on that one slide, and it's in the solicitation, obviously. What we're looking for is progress, and we sort of expect progress on all 7 of those items. At the same time, it's not equal progress on each of those. And so that's something that we think the community should know, that we are looking for progress on all 7, but we recognize that progress on some may be greater than others. And that's probably something we're going to come back, whoever we award this to, that list is something we're going to come back to and refer back to from time to time. So the better you can build into the proposal and consider it then, all the better. And then secondly is thank you for the people who have submitted NOIs. What we encourage you to do is, based on what you've heard today, to go back and look at your NOI to sort of see how what we've presented today, how your NOI stacks up and aligns to that in case there's any adjustments you want to make. So back to you, Shana.
Thanks, Lauren. So actually, that was perfect timing, because I was going to say there are probably a couple comments that would want to be made by our sponsoring agencies. So that's one comment from Lawrence. Monica, do you have any additional comments you would like to make before we move into Q&A?
No, I'm good. Thank you. Just thank you. Covered very well. Thank you so much. And thank you to everybody that sent the NOI. So looking forward to the Q&A.
Excellent. The first question is from Bob Chen, which is the expectation that the program, would fund all of its activities under the cooperative agreement, including specific research projects, or are additional resources potentially available determined post-award through discussions with sponsors? Lawrence, do you want to answer that?
Yes, thank you. So we're providing the funding. It's certainly allowed that the proposing organizations that you can add, that you can have cost sharing, and then you can bring in other financial contributions from others. So you can do that at the proposal stage, and then after we select an awardee, if the awardees want to bring in financial support to their institution to do this work from outside NASA and NOAA, that's certainly allowable. And so it says, are they potentially available, determined post-award through discussion? Yes, but I would say that's likely to be from outside NASA and NOAA.
Great. So the next question is, does multi-sectoral refer to different application / sector areas or different organizational types, such as academic, private sector, and government? I mean, I can go ahead and answer that. We expect both. So there's a multidisciplinary component, and then there's the multi-sectoral component, and then there's the different thematic areas, which I think is where you're getting to different application or sector areas. And so we're looking for organizational types to be diverse. So it should include consideration of academic, private sector, government, or other agencies. Are there any other elaborations on what I just said from Lawrence?
Yep. Shane, I think yes, you hit it. I would turn it around a little bit to sort of suggest, think about what's the range of expertise that you're going to be needing to accomplish the program of activities. And so we're encouraging this multi-sectoral because we think that is in a way to bring in the range of expertise that's going to be needed to either go broad or deep on the items that you're proposing in the program of activities.
Great. From Becky, the question is, if you were to select 2 proposals to be awarded, would scope for each be reduced and how? Would there be fewer number of topics, themes, or divide up some of the objectives? Lawrence, would you like to take this one?
Sure, yeah. So to some degree, it depends on how much the what the proposal comes in at. And so certainly, we did put in there, what the agencies are willing to fund, but that doesn't necessarily mean that every proposal is going to get right up to that level. And so it could be that if we see 2 or 3 proposals that are well below, that could be a way that we could combine them. So that's one consideration. If we do see a couple of proposals that are really close to the max, then, and if we really want to pursue both of them, then yes, we would likely to have negotiations with each of the proposing teams, and to reduce the scope to what we think is appropriate. So that'll be a negotiation process. I guess you should propose what you think is appropriate for satisfying the objectives, and so I guess that's what we suggest you do, rather than trying to propose what you want to propose rather than trying to imagine how you would be de-scoping it at this stage.
Excellent. And this is actually a question that I don't know. So Lawrence, I'm going to have to default to you on this one. I apologize. But do the 1-page letters of reference up to 3 count against the 20-page limit?
They do not. I thought that was in the solicitation, but I believe they are in addition to the 20.
Okay. I'll look through that and just confirm. Are the slides available for download? I know that we'll take the questions and put them up in the FAQ. Can we post the slide deck on Inspires?
Yes, that's what we'll do.
Excellent. And then let's see, from Bob Chen, is the structure of the USGS Societal Benefits Repository fixed or open to change or expand as part of this cooperative effort? Joe, or potentially Krista, if she's still on, can you answer this by chance?
Yeah, I'm trying to see if Chris is on. I can't speak for USGS, but the repository is in active development, and yes, the awardee would be able to do that, but I don't think you need necessarily go through this funding mechanism. If you have any interest, or I guess advice, or want to collaborate with us on building out this repository, feel free to reach out to me or Krista separately as well.
So it's my understanding that the repository is currently in its beta version. And so part of this will be helping. I think what we're interested in on our side is finding a way to share what's coming out of the awarded proposals, like all the value that's coming out of the proposals amongst our agencies, and have a centralized repository for this information. But then also it's helping build the repository itself. And so there's a component of it that I think Joe's talking about that, will help us kind of think through what's possible as we work through this with the awarded activities. Let's see, do the decisions that the assessment focuses on have to include satellite observations in the suite of data that they are based on, or are environmental data that do not come from satellites of interest as well? I don't know. Let's see. Chris or Vanessa, would you like to talk about this? And then I can add on a couple comments too.
Sure. I guess I would say that, non-satellite observations are of interest, but they're not the primary focus. I think, especially, given that it's NASA and NOAA and NESDIS funding this, that their primary interest is in satellite observations. But I think one of the things that you should keep in mind is that a lot of times these data from satellites are used in conjunction with other Earth observation types, in situ observations, radars, and etc. So I don't think I don't think you should completely eliminate those other data sources from what you're considering, but you should definitely, I think the focus is satellite data.
Yeah, so I will, I'll follow up on Chris's comment that absolutely satellite data is of interest, looking at NASA and NOAA, but understanding what other data are used in conjunction with satellite data is definitely of interest, and it really brings awareness to both organizations. So I would not discourage people to include that with their satellite data.
Excellent, thank you. Let's see. The call states that people in leadership roles within NASA and NOAA should not be part of the proposal submission. Does this include non-federal employees who may be engaged in existing NASA or NOAA programs, such as the DACs? Lawrence, could you take this one?
Sure. So that is for people in leadership roles at NASA and NOAA. I would not say that that includes people who are engaged in, like, people at the DACs are certainly allowed to participate in this. So is that clear enough? So it does not include that comment does not include non-federal employees who are engaged in NASA or NOAA programs.
Okay. And, you know, I would say maybe as we answer these, you know, I'm just going through the chat now, but if we have not robustly responded to any questions that are posed just in the chats, like, please feel free to raise your hand, come off, you know, mute and talk to us, you know, come off camera too. I mean, I just invited the sponsoring agencies to come off camera, but all of you can do this too. And so let's go to the next question.
Shana, let me add that that'll be a good one to clarify in the FAQ. So we'll do a FAQ on that one.
Perfect. Noted. Thank you. Okay, so the next question from the chat is that the call states that the team should not include people who are in leadership positions at NASA or no. I think we just defined the leadership positions, but maybe we can say something more. Is there any particular articulation of leadership positions at NOAA and NASA that we need to, that we can add beyond what we've already stated, Lawrence or Vanessa?
Let's
No, I
cover
think
that in the
Lawrence
FAQ.
covered it well.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so how flexible is the annual budget limit? Can we front load the funding? Lawrence? Did you hear the question?
And so it just,
Oh, I think he's
yes.
having some
Can you hear?
technical issues.
It looks like his connection's choppy, Shana.
Yeah,
Let's come back to that
think,
one since NASA's doing the distribution.
I mean, I think we set up the budget as it's reflected for a reason. And so, you know, there may be slight modifications compared to what you see reflected, but I don't see, you know, I don't think that we'd be able to front load it by much more than what you've already seen stipulated in the solicitation. Lawrence, are you back? No, he's not back. So that's what
Why
I would
don't
say.
we, Shana, I think there's really specific guidance on that one. Why don't we add that into the FAQ in case Lawrence's connection doesn't come back since NASA's doing the distribution?
Yeah,
But I think there's a very clear answer to that one.
Yeah, we can do that for sure. Okay, so moving on, to clarify the question about the budget, should the proposed budget be sufficient to fund the research projects presented in the menu of program activities in the proposal? Or is the expectation that the team will have to apply for funding from elsewhere to carry out those research projects? So, hey, Lawrence, are you okay?
Yeah, sorry, my signal went out. Can you hear me now?
I can, yeah, or we
Yeah.
can.
So let me answer the Molly's question first, and then I'll get to this one. So there is some degree to front load the funding. So we can do that to some degree, maybe on the 20-25% level. I would suggest that people propose what they would like the budget profile to be, and then that'll be part of the negotiation that we have with the awardees. And so there is some flexibility. Yeah, to a degree, I would say, again, on the 20-25% level. And so there is an ability to front load it, or you could back load it. You could do any number of things. So you do not have to maintain a flat budget profile within reason. In terms of should the proposed budget be sufficient? Yes. We're not expecting people to have to apply for outside funding. All we were saying was that you're allowed to do that. You're allowed to look for funds from outside the sponsors to add to your work, but that is not an expectation, but it's an allowable activity. And that we are expecting that what you propose to do would be funded with the available resources that NASA and NOAA can provide.
Could I possibly ask a follow-up question?
Yes.
Thank you so much. So we are supposed to propose a program of activities, and as you said, if funded, we would then work with NASA and NOAA to figure out which of those activities we would actually carry out. So I'm just wondering, how do you imagine that working for the purposes of the budget? Because we would need a different budget depending on which of those activities actually get approved.
Right, and so you can propose what you think that set of activities are, and then after we do the cooperative agreement activities, we'll have that negotiation, and if there is a modification to the budget that's needed, then we can address that at the time that we do that discussion. It's a cooperative agreement, so we have flexibility in that with the budget arrangements.
Hey, Lawrence, I have a
But
follow-up.
at this stage, propose what you think the program activities and what you think that range of activities should be.
Lawrence, I have a follow-up question along those same lines. To what extent do you all prefer the proposal to focus on describing specific research activities that we'd pursue before collaborating with you all on exactly what directions to go, versus focusing on sort of defining the structure and approach to which we would be identifying research activities in the first place?
So I think in the section 3, where we talk about the socioeconomic assessments, I think we lay out in there, we sort of say we want you to propose what you think a reasonable set of themes and decision types and other things. And so we're looking to see what your proposal is, what your framework you have for how to cover this. And within that, what are the research methodologies or other sorts of things that you think are applicable to what you're proposing, to that framework that you're proposing.
Thanks.
Okay, and I think the previous question also answered what Bob has placed in here. So I'll go to Marvin's next question, which is returning to satellite data and data utilization. Since this is a cooperative agreement, can we simply propose using the state-of-the-art available, or do we need to include any costs of acquiring satellite data in the proposal?
So if you are if you're proposing an activity which is going to be needing to acquire satellite data from commercial entities, then yes, you would need to include the costs of that. What I'm reading there is you all actually conducting the application itself, which may be a little bit beyond what I think we're imagining in this solicitation. And so if there is any need for the proposal teams to acquire data that's not available from civil agencies, and you need to acquire it from commercial companies, then yes, you would be expected to include those costs in your proposal. But again, you all should be thinking about whether you're conducting socioeconomic assessments or whether you're conducting applications. Our interest is in advancing socioeconomic assessments with this solicitation.
Excellent. So is someone who leads a research group at NASA GIS considered to be in a leadership position at NASA for the purpose of participation on the proposal team? I think at this point we've probably covered this because it's not which center you're at. It's about the different positions in the way that Lawrence mentioned earlier. I don't know. Any additional comments on this? And we'll make sure to update it in the FAQ as well. Lawrence, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I guess I would say to turn it around and sort of say, look, if you're considered part of the NASA GIS leadership team, then you're in a leadership position. If you have a lead role within a particular research project, that doesn't seem like you're part of the NASA GIS leadership team. So we realize this is a little bit broad. But you know, we're allowing people to sort of identify if they're in leadership positions or not. So we'll cover more of it in the FAQ.
Excellent. So the next question is, what is it about value of information approaches that you find limiting and need to go beyond? VOI could be interpreted very broadly. I mean, maybe as a first comment, I'll just say that it's not that we necessarily find it limiting. It's that part of the work that you need to do in writing your proposal is understanding the different approaches that have been used, and value of information is one of the most often used approaches. And so if we're looking for, you know, new mechanisms, new methods, then if you're expanding on approaches for VOI that have not yet been used, that's one way to do it. But if you can also consider other socioeconomic assessment approaches, then that's how we really contribute to the state of this assessment component. And so it's not that it's limiting. It's actually incredible, which is why you see so much of it. We're just looking to broaden the different mechanisms and opportunities for approaching socioeconomic assessments. Lawrence or Vanessa, any additional comments on this?
I'll jump in
Shana,
here.
I did want to add to that something with value of information, again, being incredibly useful for the economic assessments that we do within NESDIS. We have also combined value of information with jobs to be done, which is a different methodology that looks specifically at decisions informing particular jobs within sectors. So I think it's also really interesting to combine approaches with VOI. And I think that's what Shana was getting at. If there are unique ways of combining VOI or expanding beyond VOI, that is something that we're very interested in seeing.
Chris, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I was just going to jump in and say, yeah, I think both Shannon and Vanessa, you did a good job of articulating that. I think some of the limitations. I think one of the other problems with VOI is that often the way it has been applied is it forces you to very much simplify the problem. And a lot of times in these agencies, we're dealing with very kind of complex observing systems with multiple data inputs. And so, you know, like really figuring out how to expand the VOI framework to deal with those more complex situations, or coming up with alternative methods potentially to look at, you know, how do you deal with, you know, multiple inputs, multiple data inputs into the production of some kind of knowledge that can be used in decision making, is what we're looking for there. So it's not to say that that's, you know, wrong or we're uninterested in it. It's just like, I think a lot of the applications we've seen have been applied to very simple, straightforward problems that don't necessarily translate into techniques that can be used in the agencies to really, evaluate the quality of different observing systems. So.
Great, thanks, Chris. Let's see. The next question is essentially, let's see. The letters of reference subsection allows for up to 3 one-page letters of affirmation. Later in the proposal document, there is a separate section called Statements of Commitment and Letters of Support, Feasibility, and Endorsement. Are letters of endorsement from project partners permitted in this section as well? These would be in addition to the 3 letters of reference in the STM section. Yeah, Lawrence?
These are intended to be the same. We will clarify it in the FAQ, but my sense is we just had inconsistent language. They're intended to be the same. We will clarify that with an FAQ, or maybe we do have a clarification in the solicitation itself. But it's not meant to be both lots and lots of letters. And also, I think unless the statements of commitment, letters of support, if that is for the co-Is to sort of state that they're aware that they are part of this proposal, then that's a different item than that's referring to in the letters of reference. So, Anissa, I don't know if we addressed your question, but I think the statements of commitment are what co-Is need to do in order to say, yes, I'm on this proposal, I'm aware, and all. Why don't we clarify it in the FAQ?
Noted, will do, Lawrence, thank you. Okay, so it looks like we've got 3 questions left, and then we can open it up in case anybody has additional questions. But is there a preference for focusing domestically or internationally? Or is it okay to focus on both? Collaborations with federal agencies, is it okay to simply get cooperation from an individual within an agency, or does collaboration need to be more formalized with agency management? So one is domestic or international or both, and then the other is the collaboration with federal agencies, whether it's with an individual or formalized cooperation.
I'll say from NASA's side, and I can turn it over to Vanessa and Monica for NOAA's perspective. We think on NASA's side, the preference is for both, or allowance for both. That's what we're looking for you all to propose. So we think it's both. In terms of collaborations, that's really up to you all, the proposing to, in terms of the people you want to coordinate with. I think the people in those agencies are best able to know how that agency works in terms of how much coordination and collaboration needs to be occurring with their management. And so that's not for us to comment on how another agency works. We leave it to you to discuss with the particular people you want to work with, how they want to handle it within their own agencies. Vanessa, Monica, do you want to comment on NOAA's view on domestic or international?
I think we are on the same page with you, with NASA, Lawrence. I think both would be interesting for both of us.
Same from the Nestis angle. Thanks, Lawrence. You covered it really well.
Excellent. Okay, so related to this discussion of budget, related to the proposed program of activities and the fact that this is a consortium grant, should we be prepared that if certain consortium members are proposing to lead certain activities, and if NASA NOAA does not prioritize those activities in the cooperative agreement, the role of those consortium members could be reduced or removed?
So, Jana, can you hear me?
Yes, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to read the
Yep.
question my own way. Go ahead,
So
Lawrence.
that is something that with the consortium-based approach, we are looking for you all to have the flexibility and agility to move in and out of projects as you see fit. And so from that standpoint, it could be that as the PI and in the cooperative agreement, if it is something where the consortium needs to flex and pick up other things that, other skills that are available elsewhere. And that means, in terms of getting in and out of projects, if some projects are going well, you have the ability to put more. If some projects are not going well, you have the ability to sort of conclude those projects and move them to other things. And so with the consortium approach, we're looking for you to have that flexibility and agility. And that would mean that you would have the ability to change the skill set that you need on any individual item in that program of activities. And so, yes, consortium members can be reduced or removed. So, yeah, that is going to be a decision by the PI and the project team, more so than NASA and NOAA. Obviously, it'll be a discussion point, but that'll be a decision by the PI, not direction from NASA or NOAA.
Great. And so let's see. Building on George's question from the other direction, what do we need to do to establish that approaches other than VOI do indeed provide a logical measure of socioeconomic value? Does anyone, Lawrence? I'm going to pick on you again, and maybe Chris or someone else.
I'll say a little bit, then maybe Chris can join in. I mean, to some degree, if you're interested in working on and proposing approaches, whether it's VOI or other approaches, I think that's part of what the responsibility you have in writing the proposal in terms of describing what it is. And I think we sort of in the STM section, you're there to describe the rationale behind what it is that you're proposing. And I think that's more the sense of, how to describe what you're asking for. So if you are interested in a range of techniques, then describe, what's the range of techniques and the rationale that you have. If I misinterpreted the question, please restate it. Chris, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think that really puts it well, Lawrence. I think it's like any scientific method, right? You need to show that what you're doing is logical and valid. So, I think part of the expectation for this solicitation is you're going to be publishing, work in the peer-reviewed literature. So, if you're using approaches other than VOI, they should be able to get through peer review. And yeah, as we've talked about, there are challenges in our agencies applying the VOI framework just because of the complexity of some of the problems we deal with. So we are absolutely interested in pursuing those things, but at the same time, VOI has a very solid microeconomic foundation for why it's a valid way to approach these problems. So I don't think it should be thrown out, but I think expanding how it's applied and potentially looking at new frameworks, it would be welcome in this work.
Thanks, Chris.
Excellent. And so is there, from Bob Chen, is there any limit on the number of formal co-PIs or co-Is? Also, should proposals plan on having one cooperative agreement with other consortium members as sub-awardees, or are multiple parallel cooperative agreements possible?
So from my perspective, there's no limit on the number of formal co-PIs or co-Is. My suspicion is it's going to be budget driven in terms of how many can you afford and how many do you want to propose to, so that's up to you all in terms of, so there's no limit that I know of. That's up to you all to decide what you're going to be proposing. We are planning on a cooperative agreement, one from NASA to the awardees, one from NOAA to the awardees. And so I think you could plan for that. That's how we're planning on doing this sort of activity. I think we expressed that in the solicitation, if I'm not mistaken. And then we're anticipating that the PI's organization will be the one to work with the sub-awardees. In the chance that there's someone from a NASA center or a NOAA entity that's on the proposal, then I imagine we're going to fund those people directly, but we don't need a cooperative agreement to work inside our own agencies. But we're trying to put as much onto the PI as possible. Having multiple cooperative agreements between NASA and NOAA to other entities complicates the control and the management options that a PI has. And I think we're trying to make sure that the PI has as much control over the project and the program of activities as possible. So we would discourage having multiple parallel cooperative agreements just because that limits the PI's control. Control may be too strong a word. Management.
Okay, perfect. And then the final question, which is there a preferred type or format of socioeconomic assessments? I think what the goal is that we're excited to see what you propose. I think that's the answer to that question. It's not that we have a preference. It's that, I mean, we've explained some of the thinking behind VOI and our intent to see a more robust set of approaches. And so there's no preference, and we look forward to seeing what you come up with in your proposal. That's the last question in the chat. Does anyone have any additional questions for us? We're reaching towards the time in which we close, which is 11:30. We've done amazing with the time that we've had, but any additional questions from those in attendance? I would suggest you speak up, come off mic and ask if you do.
Just a minor question about form submission. The current and pending support document is required for the PI and funded team members who devote more than 10% of their time to the proposed work. That 10%, is that 10% across the 5-year project period or 10% in any specific year?
Lawrence, did you hear that question?
I did not. I'm having real connectivity issues today. I heard something about. Can you state the question again, Shana?
Yeah. So the
go ahead. Sorry.
The current and pending support document that PI and COIs need to submit is supposed to include discussion of places where greater than 10% or whenever more than 10% of their time is contributed to the proposed work. Is that 10%, is that during the project period as a whole or individual years? So if someone's going to work on a research element of the consortium for 15% of their time in, say, the second year, but not in other years, do they need to submit that information, or how do we think about that 10% threshold?
I would suggest, I mean, that it's based on how you lay out your proposal. I mean, Lawrence has mentioned that you can think of this as if you're building a consortium and you expect certain activities to take place, then you'd want to reflect what that level of effort looks like across those level of the different activities that you're talking about. So it's more based on how you propose than it is any specific prescriptive component. I mean, we are looking for the proposal to be reflective of the entire period of engagement for the 5 years. But if you're proposing a particular set of activities that require different changes in that level of effort, then you just reflect that effectively in your proposal.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
No problem. Any other questions before we close out today's session or telecon? Okay, with that being said, thank you to everyone for your interest in this topic. We're excited to see the proposals that come up. Do feel free to continue to reach out to me in case you have any additional questions. And thanks to our co-sponsoring and collaborating entities here today. I appreciate all of you being with us and your participation in today's telecon. So thanks so much, and we look forward to your March proposals. Have a great day, everyone.